Well, our intention at church was to try to do our Sunday morning Bible class uh, and stream it live, and then make a recording as well and post it on YouTube. We've had some problems with the camera that we've been using, but mostly I believe it's a problem with the Wi-Fi connection. Every time we've tried to do that last week and this week, the image doesn't work well and doesn't turn out well, and sometimes it just disconnects. The class Sunday, I think we only got like 7 minutes of the material. So my intention is to record what was intended for the class, and we will post it and then try to get the difficulties that we're facing with Wi-Fi figured out so that we can go ahead and stream the classes to YouTube and to the church website. This class is about the new creation. Kent and I have been studying this for several years, and I have shared with Kent my findings and what I've come to believe on that, and he wanted me to do a class on the subject. It's very, I believe, very important. As I've explained, I think, in the sermon and in the previous class, that when I became a Christian, my concept of that I was taught and that I kind of grew up with from watching cartoons and hearing people talk is that we're going to be saved, and when we die, we go to heaven, we become angels, and we sit on clouds with a halo and a harp and wings. That's the very simplified kind of moronic view of our destiny. But when I first became a Christian, that was my goal, was be saved and go to heaven. And I thought that's where I would be eternally. And what I've learned since then is that that's really not our goal. It is something we want to happen, but it's only a small part of the picture. And the big picture is that God wants to bring us to a place of new creation so that we are able to accomplish His purpose and goals for us. That is to co-rule with Him over the universe. And heaven is, when we die, of course, we want to be saved, and as a result, we will go to the saved category of heaven. And but that's only a place of safekeeping. We will not be there eternally. It's a waiting place for the time when Jesus will return, and we will then reclaim our resurrected bodies, which will be then in the image of Jesus. There's several verses that portray this concept. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, it's a text that we looked at in the last class period that we had, and actually it was, I think, recorded. But 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul says, "But we do not want you," verse 13, "we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep." And asleep is a term he begins to use to refer to death, because the death of a Christian is temporary, and he wants to emphasize the temporary nature of death now that Christ has come. And so he calls it sleep. And so he says, I don't want you to be unaware, uninformed about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as do the rest who have no hope. And for if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus. So when he says he'll bring with him, it talks about Jesus returning to the earth. And he says that he's going to bring with Jesus those who have died. So this text indicates that when we die, we do go to be with Jesus. But it's temporary, because when he returns, he's going to bring those who have gone to be with him. He'll bring them with him when he returns. And he says, verse 15, "For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord shall not precede those who have fallen asleep," or those who have died. I get from this text that evidently there was some conversation going on in Thessaloniki about what about those who are alive, still alive when Jesus returns? And will they have some kind of advantage over those who have died as Christians? And he's clearing this issue up. Verse 16, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first." So the dead in Christ are those who are asleep. They're with him in heaven. He brings them with him when he returns to the earth, and he resurrects those from the grave. They will rise. They arise first, then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words. So we learn a little bit about what's going on here, about the end of time. I like the way N.T. Wright says it when he says, heaven's a great place, but it's not the end of the world. The Bible talks about that place. The story of the rich man and Lazarus. You've got Lazarus, the believer, goes and is in Abraham's bosom or in his comfort, but he's separated from the place where the rich man went. And where the rich man went, there was suffering and anguish and torment. It wasn't what we think of hell, the end of time burning or whatever, but he's in anguish as a spirit in the spirit world, whereas Lazarus is in comfort. And it's interesting that he begs to have Lazarus just put a drop of water on his tongue. Jesus says in another place that they go about in waterless places. I'm not real sure I understand all that I know about that. I know that when Jesus cast the demons out of the man at the tombs, he cast them into the swine that were a herd of swine that were there, and they all ran down into the water. So there must be some relationship to spirits being in anguish because they're in a waterless place. I know our bodies are, I don't know what it is, like 80% water. There might be some connection there. But the point I'm making is that when a Christian dies, they go to be with the Lord. And it's a place where they're comforted and protected. Those who aren't Christians, or who are not in a relationship with God when they die, they are, as the Jews taught it, were in the atmosphere of the earth. And they were referred to as demons. The word demon in the first century Jewish belief was not that they were specially created evil beings, spirit beings, but that they were the spirits of men and women who had died outside of a relationship with God. Not that they were particularly evil, even though some of those certainly would be evil. You can imagine Adolf Hitler as a spirit, as a demon, what kind of mischief he might hope to get into. Anyway, so that's what we learned from that. And then, so Jesus is going to return. He's going to resurrect them. Some people say, well, when I discussed this many years ago with different people, they felt like, well, but we're going to reign from heaven, or we're going to be spirit beings. If that were true, why would he bring them back? I mean, if that's our goal, to be in heaven and just be with Christ in heaven, then those who die go there. They are that. Why would he bring them back and put them into their bodies? That just really doesn't make sense. He has another purpose. As we continue to look at some of these passages, I think Romans 8 is a really important passage. And Paul talks about a couple of things. He talks about that time when we are resurrected, when Jesus returns, that he was talking about in 1 Thessalonians 4. But in this text in Romans 8, verse 18 to the end of the chapter, he also talks about the creation. And that the creation itself, it appears, is going to go through some transition as well. And so let's listen to the text. He says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us." So this is yet future, and he's not talking about dying and going to heaven here. And then he says, in referring to the glory that's to be revealed, he says, "For," verse 19, which connects to the glory that's to be revealed, "for the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God." This is either an anthropomorphism, where human characteristics are ascribed to something not human. But I think the text implies that the creation has some kind of consciousness. I know that sounds crazy, strange. Something I've learned over my 73 years is that we don't, just because something doesn't seem to make sense to us, or scientifically it doesn't seem to fit, therefore it can't be true. There is the possibility that actually we may not know everything we need to know. The idea of man ruling over the creation, what's to rule? I mean, if the creation is just dead matter, what's to rule? I was watching TV not too long ago, and they were talking on a little science program about how plants are able to sense human emotion. And that's why we refer to some people as having green thumbs. They are able to grow plants better. And what they found is that these people actually love the plants, and many times express that love for the plants. And they've monitored scientifically these plants and found that a change takes place in the plant itself, and it responds positively to human affection. Whereas plants that don't receive it, or plants who are purposefully shown hatred as an experiment, don't prosper, and they don't flourish, and they die. So I don't know. Does the creation have a consciousness? I don't know. but it sounds like it might, because you have the anxious longing of the creation. You have the creation eagerly waiting for something. Verse 20, the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly. How does a creation willingly or unwillingly accept something? And it says it was subjected in hope. How does the creation hope? That the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So the whole text smacks with the idea of that the creation is waiting for something, and it's anxiously longing for the freedom of the sons of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. Creation groans, the creation suffers pains of childbirth, waiting for its birth. That's the picture that's presented here. Verse 23, and not only this, but also we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves. That's not an anthropomorphism, because we're anthropy, we're humans. And we do groan within ourselves. What do we groan about? Waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. So he says that we're waiting to be adopted as sons. Well, are we not already children of God? Yes, we are. And he says we're waiting for the redemption of our body. Have we already been redeemed? Yes, we have been redeemed. There's too much text that says that. But here he gets specific and says that we're waiting for the redemption of our body. So how is our body going to be redeemed? It has to be the resurrection, because our bodies die, and our body is subjected to futility and dies, and then it's going to be redeemed, and that's the resurrection that Paul was talking about in our previous text in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And then he says, for in hope we have been saved. So just being saved is not the whole thing. We're saved in hope. Hope in the Bible doesn't mean that, when we use the word hope in English, we use it in the concept of, well, I hope so. Are you going to get something for your birthday that you've wanted? And you say, well, I hope so. And there's an element of doubt there. In the Greek, in the first century, hope was used to mean an anxious longing for something that you're going to receive. So you're anxiously waiting for it. And that's how the word hope is used. So what are we anxiously waiting to happen? Well, the redemption of our body. We want our new bodies. So we've been saved, and we could say if being saved was the whole ball of wax, and we'd go, okay, well, it's done. We're where we want to be. When we die, we'll go to heaven. We're saved. He says, no, we're saved with the anticipation of, or with the hope of, the redemption of our bodies. So it's interesting also, the word hope is used almost all the time once we get to the New Testament. When you see the word hope, it's connected with the resurrection. It's the hope of our calling. It's the hope of our salvation. Hope, the resurrection is why we were saved. It's the end of death. It's the end of the consequence of sin. I've come to believe from Romans chapter 5, or I'm sorry, Romans chapter 7, that Paul says in Romans 5 that Romans 7, that sin is in our body. Sin is in our flesh. And evidently we were created that way. And I don't believe Satan made Eve sin. I believe he teased out of Eve what was already there. There was the propensity towards sin in her body, in her flesh. And he says then in Romans 7 that he wanted to serve God in the inner man, but he saw a different law at work in his body, in the outer man. And so sin came about through Adam and Eve, and God then separated them from the tree of life. He says in the text that if he didn't separate them and they continued to eat of the tree of life, they would live forever, even though they have sinned. I think sometimes we believe that sin is that death is a natural a natural result, a natural consequence of sin. But it's not a natural consequence, because Adam and Eve died because they were separated from the tree. They were separated from the tree of life because they sinned, and God didn't want them to live forever that way. There's a lot of issues that come up when we begin to realize that. Why would God create us with sin in the flesh? I don't know. I assume that it's so that free will can come into effect. If I have no choice but to serve God, then I don't know that there's any glory there for God. I don't know. I use a simple illustration that I've heard all my life, all my Christian life, is that God didn't create us as robots. If you married a robot and the robot was programmed to say "I love you," then those words are pretty hollow. But if the being is created to have the choice and they choose to love you and serve you, then there is glory in that. And so I suspect, and I could be wrong, but I suspect that we were created with free will because it honors God for us to choose to love him. And if we had no other choice, then we're not choosing to love him. And so if the propensity towards sin or rebellion is in us, then choosing to serve him has dignity in it and is based in love and honor. The problem is that man didn't choose to serve God, and Satan tickled or teased that out of Eve, and she sinned. She chose rebellion against God, and man followed. The male followed. And so man became less than what he was created to be, co-rulers with God over the creation. And so it was actually pity, a severe mercy, that God let us die. He lets our bodies die, because that's where sin is he lets the body die. When the body dies, the sin is destroyed with it. So we're then going to get new bodies, not brand new bodies, but these bodies that are recreated in which righteousness dwells. We're going to get bodies like Jesus has now. I suspect this is why Jesus, as a man, he had to die too. Death is not the natural consequence of sin. You don't have to sin as a human to die. Babies die all the time. They haven't sinned. Newborn babies who are fully human, out of the womb, die. And they haven't done anything. So it's part of the human condition to die. And God is the one that set that in motion by separating us from the tree of life. And it's a severe mercy. It needs to happen. So Jesus, as a man, died. And when he did, and even though sin was in his flesh, Jesus didn't sin. He didn't give in to the temptation. He was tempted in all ways as we are. Well, how could he be tempted if there's no possibility of temptation? There's no possibility of sin. And again, as I refer to Romans 7, Paul says sin is in the body. It's in the flesh. So he gives up his earthly body, even though it didn't really cause him that much trouble. But it was killed. And he gets a new body. Again, not brand new, because it's the old body that's been recreated. And he wasn't a ghost floating around in heaven. He had a body, has a body currently. And with his new body, he appears to the disciples. They see him in the closed room. It doesn't say he walked through a door. It said he appeared, which means he was probably there before he became visible. He appeared to them. They started screaming. It's interesting that one of the records says they thought he was a ghost. They start screaming and they're terrified. And he says, "Hey, it's me. Don't be afraid. Look, it's me. Touch me. Feel the marks of the crucifixion. Put your hands here in my side. Don't doubt. Give me something to eat." Well, I doubt that his new body was hungry, but the point is ghosts don't eat. So he's proving to them that he's not a ghost. And the point is that he's the first one to go through what every human now is going to go through. That this body of sin is going to die. We're going to be resurrected with new bodies. And will those new bodies have the ability to sin? I don't know. I suspect they will. Again, there's no glory in being robots. But that's the purpose of what we're going through right now. We are already making the choice of whether we want to serve God or not. And once we've made that hard choice and based our lives on it, then I think the potential of sin in our new lives would be very, very slim. An opinion, okay? But it's interesting that Paul, in this Romans 8 passage, he talks about both the redemption of the creation and the redemption of our bodies, and that's all going to happen when Jesus returns. There's an interesting text that refers to the creation aspect of that in 2 Peter chapter 3, where Peter says, starting with verse 10, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up." So the destruction of creation. Then he gives an admonition, since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning and the elements will melt with intense heat. So he's referring to the day of God as the same day we would have to assume is the same day spoken of in 1 Thessalonians 4 when the Lord returns with those who had fallen asleep, and the day that the creation was anticipating and looking forward to in Romans 8, where the glory of the sons of God are going to come in. And the creation, it indicates the creation intends to share in that glory. Well, here he says, on that day of the Lord, everything's going to be burned up with intense heat. But then he says, but according to his promise, we are looking for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. So I believe this is a snapshot of what we read in Romans 8, that the creation is anticipating the glory that is to be revealed to us, and the creation is going to partake of it. Let me just say this. It's more of a technical thing that I'm only going to go into this because I know some of the people who will view this are pretty good Bible scholars, and they're a little bit more technical and need something on this. The first thought many of them are going to say is, well, this is an apocalyptic piece and it's figurative, and so therefore, you really can't use this to refer to the actual end of the world. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with that, every language and every literature has figures of speech and figurative language. And the Jews did as well, and it's called apocalypse or apocalyptic. And today we hear the word apocalypse being used to refer to Jesus coming back, or a big war that's going to happen before the end of time. And that's not the way it was used in the Bible at all. Apocalyptic language was language used by the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel especially uses apocalyptic. And it uses figures of speech to refer to judgments. And the enemy is going to suffer judgment, and the righteous are going to enjoy blessings. But the judgments and the blessings are described in figurative terms. Like the judgment on the unrighteous, the stars are going to fall out of the sky, the mountains will be moved out of their place, and the mountains will run with fire and pitch, and the earth will be burned up. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will be turned to blood, and so on and so on. And that is to describe the world of the wicked. Yes, their world is going to be destroyed. The people who were in Jerusalem when the Assyrians came upon them, or when the Babylonians came upon them, their world was falling apart. The stars of the skies for them were falling out of the skies. Not literally, but figuratively they were suffering. And then the blessings of the righteous are even sometimes described as a resurrection from the dead, like in Daniel 12 or Ezekiel 30, I think it is. And so the valley of dry bones. But they were not to be taken literally. They were pictures of Israel's. The one in Daniel 12, I believe, is a picture of Israel's restoration. So, yes, it looks like, and people argue that Peter is using apocalyptic because in 2 Peter 3, 1 through 3, same chapter, But the first three verses, he says, "This is now, beloved, the second letter I'm writing to you, in which I am stirring up your sincere mind by way of reminder that you should remember the words spoken beforehand by the holy prophets and the commandment of the Lord and Savior spoken by your apostles." And so he's saying, I'm going to refer to what the prophets had said. And then he talks about the burning up of the elements. And the argument is that there is no reference in the Old Testament to the end of the world. And Paul's saying that Peter is saying that he's referring to what the prophets spoke. And if the prophets never spoke about the end of the world, then Peter is not talking about the end of the world when he talks about the melting of the elements of creation, the burning up of creation. However, I don't. I get the point, but the point is, I believe they did talk about it, not specifically, but apocalyptically. Can apocalyptic have a literal reference? Initially, it does not have a literal reference. But can the New Testament writers use it in a literal sense? I believe they can. The resurrection is a good example. Literal resurrection is not referred to in the Old Testament. But by the time of Jesus, the Jews believed in a literal resurrection of the dead. Where'd they get that? Well, they got it from those apocalyptic pieces that talked about the resurrection of the dead. I wrote a book called The Moses Connection in John's Gospel, and the premise that I build on in that book is how the Jews viewed the Old Testament, the writings of the Old Testament. And they saw all of it as prefiguring the age of Messiah and the age that we're in, the Messianic age. And many texts that were used figuratively in the Old Testament are used literally in the New Testament. And so I believe that's true apocalyptic as well. The apocalyptics show the complete dismantling and destruction of the universe. Is that literally going to happen? I believe so. And I think Peter describes that. Okay. So what's my point? Well, my point is I'm talking about how the new creation is looking for the redemption of human bodies, the resurrection of humans to co-rule the universe with Jesus. And the universe is going to be destroyed and resurrected along with us. And that the creation is going to enter into the same glory that we enter into. And that we are going to sit with Jesus and rule over the creation. Well, I see that I am out of time. So hopefully I can post this, and it will take the place of the class period this last Sunday that was not recorded. God richly bless you, okay, and give you comfort and strength to face the hard stuff of this life based on the reality that we're all going to get through this into glory.